We do have some breaking news to bring you on Talk Sport.
You've been listening to Windrush 75. I've got someone here that would like to say hello.
That is one that I will definitely give away for the Prince of Wales. There you go.
The Radio Academy Festival 2024. Impact Amplified.
Hello and welcome to a Radio Festival 2024 special of the Radio Academy podcast. I'm Sean Thorne, and this is the first of 3 special episodes bringing you wisdom, insight and moments from the 3 stages at this year's Radio Festival.
The Radio Academy Festival is such a highlight of the year.
I mean, what I've seen so far has been incredible. The speakers have been incredible.
Let's welcome to the stage, winner of the Arias Best Music Entertainment Show Radio 2, Scott Mills.
You can't kill off radio, and that's why I love the Radio Festival.
On this episode, we're going to be hearing from Scott Mills, Rima Ahmed, Matt Chorley, Adrian Durham, Shoob and Ella Woods. Plus, we're also going to be hearing from some of you who went to the Radio Festival as well, telling us about some of the moments that impacted you that you'd heard from sessions and talks throughout the day. Our first guest from the festival stage, Rima Ahmed from a BBC Radio Leeds, was in conversation with Matt Chorley. You would have heard Rima Ahmed's interview with Liz Truss. It was the one where she asked Liz Truss, "Where have you been?" It was everywhere. Rima was in conversation with Matt Chorley, who's talking about his brand new show on 5 Live. And after their session, they caught up with Juliette Nicholls from Pineapple Productions. And with the sunshine beaming down on them, they give you a nice, lovely insight into that day's session.
Tell me a couple of highlights from your perspective, and then we'll ask Matt.
Matt talking about inventing new ways to interview was really nice. I like that. I like that we brought some innovation to the Radio Academy Festival. And I also like just the idea that we kind of do jobs, the same kind of job, but very differently on very different subject matters. And it's really nice to find the commonalities between those two things with someone. So yeah, I think that's really nice. And I think when you're in a room full of people who know radio and who love radio, there's no kind of sort of double speak going on. It's very much like, this is what we're doing. Like the joke about that Matt made about trailing, it was like, that would only kill in that room.
Yeah, you're right.
It's
a nice
yeah.
moment when everyone's giggling.
Yeah, and everyone's like, haha, look at us, radio people, all getting it at the same time. And I love that. That's really nice.
Well, it's nice when something we've done on the radio, which I think is funny, but if you play it in the room and people laugh, because obviously you don't really know, because you don't have a live audience normally when you're on the radio, you don't know if something is genuinely laugh out loud funny. And so replaying some clips in the room to a sceptical radio audience and them laughing is quite a good feedback loop.
We're talking particularly about your first clip, your opener clip.
Yeah, so I hadn't realised quite how long it was. So I did the day that James Earl Jones died. And in fact, that was edited out, so it didn't really make any sense. The reason that the clip... So I did Star Wars, because it was on the day that James Earl Jones died, who played Darth Vader, and Keir Starmer was facing lots of rebels over removing winter fuel payments. So I did a sort of Star Wars Labour Party mashup opener to the show. Which my main feeling... listened back to it in the hall was it was just very long, and actually it wasn't the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that long. No. I think it felt long because
we were sitting there.
we were sitting there kind of being like, we haven't really said anything yet, which can feel like a long time.
Outside perspective, it
didn't feel long to me, to be fair. So I don't think worry about that. And they really enjoyed it. I think that's always a really nice thing as well, to bring a bit of the radio in front of people, like you say, and actually see the reaction and actually see, you know, the idea that you've had going in real time. That's really special.
Yeah. Was that the kind of impact you were hoping to have today, to give a few giggles, have a few insider jokes? Anything else from a kind of inspiration point of view you were hoping to?
I think I just wanted it to sound like Matt and I were having a conversation, which we were.
Yeah.
We had certain clips that we had to play, but that is very much my style of broadcasting. Is I never want it to sound like I'm sat asking someone questions and not listening to the answers, which I hear so much of. And there's nothing that makes me more furious than listening to a conversation happening on the radio that doesn't sound like a conversation. It sounds like someone has been written a cue and they have questions that they need to ask, and it doesn't matter what the other person has said, they are going to come back and ask question number 3. And so to do that in front of people and really bring a style of broadcasting to a stage, because that is exactly how I would have talked to you on the radio. That's nice. That's a really nice thing. And so if there is one thing that I would like to bring to the Radio Academy, it's just that sometimes you're not trying to get a line, and sometimes you do. And sometimes you're not trying to, be the cleverest person in the room. You're just having a conversation with someone that you're really interested in.
I suppose what I liked about it was the sort of conversation. I suppose the conversation was a good reflection of my show and therefore me. And we talked a bit about having a radio persona, or how much do you give away, or, your approach, and had I changed going from Times Radio to 5 Live? And I don't think you can, because I think listeners over, I'm now doing 2 hours, used to do 3 hours, you do 4 hours. So that's to fake that, or to have a sort of persona, I think would be exhausting. And so hopefully...
And you'd be sussed out so quickly as well. The listener is always so much on it than you think that they are. So trying to pretend to be someone else is a bad idea.
Events like this, connecting with other people in radio, audio, why are they important? How important are they?
I think because we work in radio and I don't know what anyone looks like in radio. I don't know about you, Matt, but I'll go, someone will come up to me and with their hand outstretched and be like, "Oh, Rima," and I'm like, "Oh, good God, I don't know who this person is," and they clearly know who I am. And then they'll start talking, and then I'll go, "Oh yeah, you, yeah, I know you. Yeah, we're great friends." And it's all because I've never actually seen them before. So that's always the specialness and the magic of radio, is that you form these bonds and you form these connections without not necessarily all the human things that you need to form a bond and a connection. And these sort of things are great for actually meeting the human behind the voice. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think also as well, you can go to a session on an area you don't normally think about or cover, and find things for yourself. So I might not listen to a lot of sports radio because I'm not that into sport, although obviously 5 Live do sport very well. But when someone's talking about their approach to a big tournament, well, you might be able to nick something for that, for the way you do a general election, or, the way you do an OB, that you hadn't really thought about before. And I think reaching, although we're not on a speech station, reaching into music radio and podcasts and live events is just a really interesting way to then see, actually we could tweak that, and that's a thing we could use on our show, which you wouldn't get if you normally don't listen to that world.
So I'm Emily Pitts. I work at the BBC in audio, so across radio and podcasts, BBC Sounds. Well, all the talks I've been to have been honestly brilliant. My favourite was probably the Matt Chorley with Rima Ahmed, which was just excellent. It was so funny and interesting to hear how Matt is approaching politics on BBC 5 Live, which feels like a really interesting kind of departure, a moment for something like 5 Live to be approaching politics with the kind of humour injection, hopefully reaching all sorts of new audiences as well. So that was a brilliant talk, and I think Rima did an excellent job of hosting it and brought so many of her own brilliant anecdotes from local radio that were just really interesting to hear.
And so I'm sort of quite evangelical about trying to get more people interested in politics, and a way of doing that, sounding like a normal human being and using humour, has been a big part of what I do, which is what I've tried to do so far in my now 3rd week at 5 Live.
So what was great this year is that we managed to hear from loads of the delegates who were telling us all about the impact some of the sessions had on them. So we're going to be sharing a few more of those as the episodes of this Radio Festival special roll on. This is going to be our first of 2 visits to the ARIA's stage now. All the speakers on this stage are ARIA award winners. And our first stop is with our man Ben Coley, who is going to be chatting to TalkSport's Adrian Durham.
It's the Radio Academy Festival podcast. I'm Ben Coley. I'm joined by Adrian Durham from TalkSport. Adrian, how did you find your chat?
I really enjoyed it. It was good fun.
There was something that really resonated with me with your talk, and it was where you were talking about Tom Lockyer.
Great news I can give you from someone I've just spoken to in the tunnel area is that Tom Lockyer is sitting up and he's talking to his wife, and those close to him who are in the dressing room while the players do their lap of honour. The game will not continue today.
And how you were really thrown into that situation where you had to broadcast that he was okay, you had to broadcast the severity of the situation, he could have lost his life. And that was something that really resonated with me in the chat. What's been a piece of sports commentary that you've listened to over your career in your life and it's left a lasting impact on you? You thought, wow, that's really caused a shift for me.
I think that a colleague of mine, Graham Beecroft, used to work in local radio in Liverpool, and I remember hearing his, it was sometime after it had happened, but I heard the recording of his, the time he was at Hillsborough for the disaster, and the way he was broadcasting it, and it was he wasn't really getting into the reasons why, because at the time you didn't really know the reasons why, but what he was doing was he was telling us exactly what he was seeing, and the horror of that as it unfolded might be quite difficult to kind of explain on radio or to portray just how horrific it was. He was doing it incredibly well. So amazingly, I was lucky enough to grow up and work with him. But yeah, that taught me a lot about relaying an incident like that and striking the right tone when relaying an incident like that, because sometimes it will be a huge incident, but when it's happening you won't necessarily know how huge it is, so you've got to be able to strike the right tone, and that's quite tricky.
And the theme for the Radio Academy Festival this year is impact, or impact amplified. How do you even begin to attempt to create impact as a football anchor? You know, you're seeing this game going on in front of you, but you're trying to lift that to the radio. How do you create impact for the listeners?
By putting myself in their shoes. Now, it could be various different reasons. It could be for something relatively trivial, like they've got a key player in their fantasy team, and they want him to do well, they want him to score, and that'll mean a lot to them. Or it could be a family member who's playing, they want him to do whatever is going on in the minds and hearts of the listeners. I've got to be able to put myself in their shoes. And that means that whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm broadcasting, doesn't mean that I'm shouting all the time. It just means that I'm experiencing and feeling how big a moment it could be. So to relay that to the audience, I think, is the key thing. So for some people, it might just be the Swindon Town have scored against Exeter City and it's 1-0. But for quite a number of people, for thousands of people, let's face it, thousands of people go to games. So for thousands of people, that goal means an awful lot. So you can't just throw it away. It means a lot to a lot of people. You can't disrespect the audience. So get excited about it, be visceral about it, and relay it in that way. It's important. It might not be to some people, but it is important to other people. So in terms of impact, that is how I see it. That goal means something. If you can, and what I love to do is add something to the goal. So if the goal scorer is, if it's his 15th goal of the season, throw that in. If he scored against the same opponents the previous season, throw that in. It gives the goal a bit more meaning, a bit more impact. That's how I see my job.
It's really interesting you said that. It's very nuanced. You're focusing on what you're saying and getting the facts, the stats across, but then it's being across the atmosphere, all the history, the in-betweens that have led up to that moment.
Yeah, so there's a player called Jay Stansfield, for example, who scored 2 goals for Birmingham on Monday night against Wrexham, but previously he had been on loan at Exeter, which is the club where he started. He then moved to Fulham, went back to Exeter on loan. And when he scored for Exeter, it had huge meaning, and if you didn't know that, you can't relay it. His father had played for Exeter, was a bit of a legend. His father had passed away as well at a young age. And of course this kid goes back, his son goes back to that club, and in front of the fans scores. I mean, the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up now. Yeah. It's a huge moment, and this is why it was said on stage that you've got to keep across everything. You've got to be up to date and aware of everything. You can't just rock up. Knowing information like that and then relaying it and put it into context, again, striking the right tone with that information. There's a lot of far more incidents and goals that are impacted by those kind of things than you might realise, yeah.
And finally, Adrian, how important do you think the Radio Academy Festival is for connecting people, for, you know, bringing the industry together?
You know what, I've just had experience of that. So between, how long ago was I was on stage? Maybe, 5 minutes? I've just come off stage. 2 people have come up to me and who I've never met before, and they both said to me, I really enjoyed that, I didn't know this. And I'm like, okay, this is something I wasn't expecting. But yeah, it impacts people. If it inspires them, then fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of blown away by that reaction from just a couple of people. And people often say, yeah, well, if that's been helpful to one person, but 2, wow. I think the festival is fantastic. I come here every year and I absolutely love it. So yeah, I think there's... the thing with radio, it keeps getting threatened, okay? It got threatened by video recorders. Back in the 70s and 80s, it got threatened by DVDs, from iPods, from music radio. It's now threatened by social media.
But we're still going.
We are still going. You can't kill off radio, and that's why I love the Radio Festival.
Thank you for inspiring me, and thank you for inspiring, I'm sure, plenty of other people that were listening. I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
And thank you as well. Thank you very much.
My name's Charlie Charles. I work for 95.6B Radio, which is a community station based at Reading University, but is available across Berkshire. The sessions I have enjoyed so far today, it was great to hear from TalkSport, Adrian Durham, former ARIA's winner for Speech Broadcaster of the Year. It was great, and I can only illustrate what Adrian said during that chat about the young sung heroes being the people that work behind the scenes, and that he doesn't take the job for granted.
Fundamentally, there's some incredibly talented producers at TalkSport who know their football, they know how radio works, they know how to make that preview slot, as I call it, 11 till 12:30, really sing and dance, and these are the guys that really deserve a huge amount of credit.
Yeah, most definitely. A lot of people, focus on the voices you hear on air, but impossible to do your job without those people behind the scenes, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and I'm a big believer in it being teamwork as well, and that's still the case, that we all get together, and I think there's no such thing as a bad idea, because what might be seen as a bad idea can be moulded into something that will really work.
Yeah, agree.
Our next stop is going to be the Impact stage. There were loads and loads of great sessions here. This one was all about the importance of laughter in audio, and Sharon Boadu is our interviewer here. So the first guest voice you're going to hear is the excellent Ella Woods from BBC Studios, and then you're going to be hearing from Magic FM's Kat Shoob.
So we hear about authenticity a lot in podcasting and in life in general. How do you think it plays into comedy podcasting or any other genre of podcasting?
I think authenticity is really important in comedy podcasting, because what you're doing is basically becoming another friend for the listener, and what you want from your friends is someone to make you feel better, someone who's done something probably more embarrassing than you, someone who's had a rubbish day and is ranting about it in a way that is completely mad, or someone who is kind of playing a game that you want to play, right? So something like Off Menu is actually just an amazing card game that you could play with any of your friends, or Help I Sexted My Boss is just like being the third person with William and Jordan, hearing them talk about all of this stuff, or with Sarah and Cariad's book club, it's you're sitting there with them having a laugh about this thing. So I think authenticity is absolutely key. You can't script someone, even in live radio, you can't fully script what everyone's going to say, or it just sounds completely mad and false and like it's a sort of play. So I think authenticity is absolutely key in comedy, yeah.
I think one thing I learned early on is always, if you say you're going to do something on the radio, either give a reason why you didn't do it or do it. And never just lie. Well, I mean, sometimes things are a little bit fudged. You can't always do everything you say you're going to do, but it's very key. It might just be one person that's listening to it. And if you say you're going to do a challenge, I can't remember, there was years ago we did this challenge where we had a certain amount of money and we had to spend it. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And the guy I was working with at the time was like, we have to tell the audience why we're not doing it. It doesn't have to be the real reason, but we have to tell them we're not doing it. Because it could just be one person sat there and they're like, oh, right, why have they not done that? And then they don't believe in you because they think that you're just sitting there coming up with stuff and you're making up things. And I think authenticity is really, really important. And I think sometimes as well, I used to second guess myself a little bit with what I might say on the radio and what I might not and might keep to myself. But I think it's always going to ring true with someone, whether it's like, my day-to-day with my little boy or whatever. Or if you're having a rubbish day, it's okay to come in and say, do you know what, I'm having a bit of a shocker. I'm in a terrible mood and I don't really know why. And you'll get so many people texting and going, God, yeah, me too. Is it the weather? I don't know. So just being real with it and not trying to always put on a front. And yes, seeing things through. And if you don't, give the listener a reason why you didn't.
That's amazing. That actually helped me. So piggyback of what was said in the session, this world has a lot of serious issues, like there's a lot of serious things going on. So how do we balance the seriousness with laughter so that the laughter becomes an outlet for people to just take a breather and it doesn't look like we're trivializing some of the things that's happening in the world?
I think it's by not joking about them, you know? Like, so we work on a lot of topical comedy, and topical comedy does touch on what's happening in the news, but there's a phrase in comedy which is about you punch up, you don't punch down, right? So we are not making fun of anyone having a horrible time. You are making fun of maybe people in positions of power, people who are making stupid decisions. You're taking something and you're completely making it absurd and surreal, or you're comparing something awful to a really stupid situation that's happened to you to try and get people to understand how annoyed they'd be, or the context, or, you know, we are not in the business of trying to trivialise everything happening in the world, but we are in the business of trying to give people a way to take some relief from it and understand it a bit better, sometimes understand it in a different way. You might not always want to listen to the most hard-hitting, really incredibly made news podcast about something, but you also might want to listen to a couple of people discussing something that's happening in the news and being, you know, making some analogies that actually help you understand it a bit better and help you understand why certain people feel a certain way or anything like that. But I think it's having that sort of clear line that almost everyone does, and the people that don't do that, hey, they have their fans too, and that's fine. I might not agree with what they're doing, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's similar. I'm not in the business of tearing anyone down. I'm not here to stitch anyone up. I'm not here to ride on the back of someone's misfortune. It's more, you know, looking at a subject, and if there's a funny way around it. The good thing about being in a duo is one of you can have one opinion, the other can have the other, and you can very much balance it out. It's much harder to do when you're performing on your own, recording a podcast on your own. It's just one opinion, so it's really good. And me and my co-host will sometimes look at each other, and it'll be like, he'll say something or I'll say something, and the other will go, right, I'll take the other angle on it, just to try and like even it out slightly, because nobody wants to sit there and hear any sort of hate or tearing down of others. So I think, yeah, keeping a balance.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's it. Thank you.
So our fourth and final interview that we have for you now is our second trip to the ARIA stage. Ben Coley will be catching up with the winner for Best Music Entertainment Show at the ARIAs, BBC Radio 2's Scott Mills.
Scott, you were on Radio 1 for 24 years. You're doing a very good job on Radio 2. But obviously, none of that is by accident. How have you done it? How do you connect with audiences over decades like that?
Well, I think part of it is that you are growing up with them, but then sometimes I meet people who say, I used to listen to you at school, then I listened to you at college, then I was at uni, then I got married, then I got divorced, and you're still there. And then you realise that you actually are more of a part of people's lives, and that you've soundtracked it more than you realise when you're doing it. And I also think that content-wise, I find that I'm a bit of a sponge for things like that, which is probably how I lasted on Radio 1 for so long.
Radio 1, you were just like, pop culture was just ingrained in what you were doing.
Yeah, and my brain is a sponge for that stuff because I love it. And actually, I still, in a different way, I'm still keeping in touch with it. I know what's going on, but it's just a little bit different and for a slightly older audience. You know? You
touched on something really interesting in your talk, which, as a presenter, I really resonated with. And you were talking about finding your voice on BBC Radio 2. And you do that with any new station you go to. Even, I find it a different show on a station you've already been at, is finding your voice. And you made a really good point of saying it's nothing inauthentic, it's just finding where you sit. What does that look like for you? What sort of work and preparation do you put in to be able to sound like you've been part of the fabric of a station for years?
I love to prep, and I think every presenter should. Some presenters can get away with it, like Chris Moyles doesn't prep, really. His producers do. Rylan, my friend, will quite openly admit that he can just turn up. I'm not one of those guys. So prep is key. But then I think when I joined Radio 2, I was over prepping in a way of like, Scott, you don't need to write everything down. You've done this a long time. You know, don't write it out word for word.
You mentioned it. It's that like imposter syndrome.
It is, and it definitely is in your head a lot. But also, confidence grows, and my confidence, as it did at Radio 1, has now. It's been long enough time that my confidence has grown too, where I feel able to be my authentic self. But you've got to give yourself a break, because it does take time. And you know what? I will always be grateful to Andy Parfitt and to Ben Cooper at Radio 1 I was on Early Breakfast there for 5 years. That's a 4 a.m. start. Lots of people have done it.
Yeah.
But then Ben in particular saw something. He saw like a little spark, and I remember him taking me aside one day, and I was filling in on the weekend for Jamie Theakston, and the show was a bit like live and loose, and I was a dep, I wasn't doing it full time, so it felt a bit like, I can get away with a bit more. I can be a bit more naughty. I don't know why. And I remember Ben coming in one Saturday and going, "What you're doing now, do more of that." I think he could hear, like, all right, so this could, if he refines this, we could move this to daytime. And like I said, before this, I haven't moved radio stations for nearly a quarter of a century, so it's still going to be scary, and you are still going to have to find your voice. I haven't had to do that for a while, but every presenter, I still believe that every presenter, especially in what we're in music radio, I definitely think it takes a while, and and you should give yourself a bit of a break, because it will take some time. And Radio 1 were very generous in that they gave me time for it to grow. They didn't just go, bit bland, doesn't really say anything. You can tell he's been on commercial radio. All he does is say the songs. At the time, I probably wasn't doing much more than that, but they saw or heard something that made them go, this could be something, and they let me grow rather than going, that's the end of your contract.
Which is the magic of it, because that could have been a whole career that never happened had they have been a bit impatient with you.
And I did get to the point at Radio 1 where I was like, wow, 5 years on Early Breakfast. You get to thinking, I'm never going to be moved up here, and this should be, if you like, not a lesson, but a kind of giver of hope to anyone that's on those kind of shifts. Because sometimes it doesn't happen, but actually you've got to hang in there, and sometimes it really does. Just put the work in, make your show the greatest you can make it every day. Now, if it's 5 days a week, it's never going to be award-winning every day, but just find a level that you don't want to go below.
Absolutely agree. This isn't your first Radio Academy Festival. This is probably my 4th, 5th year in a row. I love coming to it. For me as a presenter, it's really inspiring. You meet other people doing what you're doing. People chat about the mistakes that they've made along the way. You learn from it. Yeah. What is it that you love about the Radio Academy Festival as a presenter? What does it do to bring the industry together?
Well, do you know, I was actually at the TV festival in Edinburgh this year, which I'd never been to before. And this is our version of that, because when do we all get together as one? There isn't any other thing that I can think of. TV have been doing it for years. It's kind of part of the Edinburgh Festival. They all get together, they get a drink, they have lunch or dinner, and they go to all these sessions. Now, obviously, this has also been going on for a long time, but these sessions here are back to back. It's also handily right near where I work, nice. But you can be here even an hour and learn so much. The session that was on before me, I know because Tina DeHealy I'm working with at the moment on Radio 2 Breakfast, she was doing one next door at the same time. I would advise anyone that can, even if you're established in the industry already, you will find out things just from being here an hour or two that you did not know, and worlds in radio that you did, or audio that you did not even knew existed. It's absolutely fascinating, especially because there's so much of it. You know, the chat before me was from Audible about podcasts, and there's lots about news and speech. And as much as I think that I'm across our medium, there is so much of it that you miss. It's a bit like the telly. There are so many programs. You can't. So you learn a lot, and it's a place where we can all get together and talk about the number one love in our world.
Amazing, Scott. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks to Ben and to Scott, and also to all of our amazing producers on the day, Juliette, Sharon, and also a massive thank you to Adam Skin and Shannon Hackwood, who helped us out with kit, chatting to delegates around the venue, and loads more stuff as well. Absolute dream team. And most of all, thank you to you for listening. This is the first of a 3-part special bringing you the wisdom and insight from the Radio Festival. If you haven't been to the Radio Festival, I genuinely recommend checking it out. And also the other Radio Academy events are really great opportunities to connect with some really talented folk across the industry. Subscribe to the Radio Academy podcast channel as well so you don't miss an episode. Bring loads of insight on here and also info on upcoming events. And we'll see you next time for the next episode of our Radio Festival special.